Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the dry, sun-cracked heart of what is now Iran specifically, the vast Iranian plateau, where nothing should grow, and yet, somehow, it does. You're trudging across a plain of bone-dry earth that crunches softly beneath your sandals. The sky above is a white-hot ceiling, and the only shade is a distant mirage that flickers like an old TV losing signal. But don't worry, you're not alone out here. A few domed huts shimmer in the heat haze, and between them, oddly enough, green, real green, pomegranate trees, vines, a trickle of water. It shouldn't be possible. You probably wouldn't last half a day out here. Honestly, no bottled water, no SPF 70, just an unforgiving sun, and a parched breeze that tastes like dust and forgotten empires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pass a low ridge and come upon it, a walled orchard nestled in the barren land, like an emerald dropped in a bowl of ash. You hear birds chirping. The air smells faintly of wet clay and apricot blossoms, and somewhere deep within the earth, water is moving. That's the real secret. Beneath your feet, Persia's ancient gardeners are still at work. The land you're standing on now, this baked, high desert stretching across central Iran, is no beginner-level terrain. It's not rolling hills or fertile deltas. It's a sun-scorched riddle. And yet, for over 2,000 years, humans have made it bloom. The trick lies in digging deep and sideways. You might picture the Romans with their soaring aqueducts, carrying water above ground in grand arches. But the ancient Persians, they were a bit more stealthy. Instead of building up, they built down, carving vast, sloping underground tunnels called Qanats that tap into mountain aquifers and ferry the water across miles of dry land without a single drop lost to evaporation. And here's a mind bender. Some of these systems are still working. That trickle you hear by your left foot could be sliding its way through channels carved 500 years ago, maybe even by someone who wore sandals almost exactly like yours, minus the synthetic sole and questionable arch support. Historians still argue whether the original idea for Qanats came from the Persians themselves or perhaps from even earlier societies in what is now Syria. But there's no debate about who perfected them. The Achaemenid Empire, starting around 550 BCE, made Qanats a national priority. Their engineers figured out how to harness gravity, not pumps, using gently sloped tunnels and mother wells that could reach dozens of meters deep. The math had to be precise, too steep, and the tunnel collapsed, too flat, and the water just sulked in place. Your feet scuff along a narrow ridge now, and below it runs a subtle, dry depression. It's easy to miss, like a barely there scar across the land. But this is no natural groove. This is part of a Qanat shaft line, each hole marking a vertical access point for maintenance. Every so often, a vent shaft rises like a chimney of stone and silence, allowing air to circulate. You lean over one and hear nothing, just coolness and a faint echo of movement, as if the desert were breathing. Now picture the ancient diggers. They worked in pairs, often lowered by rope into vertical shafts. There, in near darkness, they chipped away at the earth with bronze tools, guided only by oil lamps and touch. One miscalculation, and the tunnel could flood or collapse entirely. So yes, digging Qanats was dangerous work, and no, OSHA was not involved. Fun little fringe tidbit. Some regions held water festivals in honor of the workers who risked their lives underground. And in certain Persian dialects, Qanat diggers were given honorific titles, just a notch below clergy. You'd think of them the way you think of astronauts now, except they went down instead of up. You stroll now through the outer edge of the garden, where irrigation channels snake quietly between rows of fig trees and grapevines. It's a gentle trickle, barely more than a whisper of water. But it's enough, always enough. Here's something to notice. The plants are clustered strategically. The taller trees shield the more delicate ones. Vines climb up wooden scaffolds to get the breeze, and absolutely nothing grows without purpose. The irrigation is gravity-fed and timed like a drumbeat. Water reaches each section of the garden for just a few minutes a day, and then it's gone. No waste, no waiting for rain that might never come. The ancient Persians even developed water clocks to track irrigation time. Picture a ceramic bowl with a hole in the bottom, floating in a larger bowl. As it slowly fills and sinks, a gardener knows when to move the sluice gate. No alarms, no flashing screens, just clay and time. And remember this for later. In most villages, that water was shared, not just between families, but between whole neighborhoods and classes. Managing it was an act of community, cooperation, and inevitably gossip. You settle near a low stone bench, maybe once used by an elder, giving orders with one hand and sipping sour cherry juice with the other. Around you, the orchard breathes. A bee hums past, a bird flutters, lands, and takes a leisurely sip from a clay basin. You can feel the air is different here, cooler, a little damp, like the garden has its own atmosphere. And it kind of does. You're not just surrounded by plants. You're surrounded by planning, science, and a deep, stubborn belief that water can be moved. Life coaxed from dust, and beauty built under an unrelenting sun. You look back at the desert, now just a pale smear in the distance. Out there, the heat is merciless, but in here, it's as if the world remembered how to be kind. You brush your fingers across the sun-warmed leaves of a fig tree and begin to walk again, this time toward the edge of the garden. There, half buried beneath the soil and shaded by a low archway, is something that looks at first glance like a drainage ditch, narrow, unassuming. You might even mistake it for an old root cellar or a place where someone stores pickles and regrets. But as you step closer, a cool gust of air rises from it. Not hot wind, not the breath of the desert. This is earth-cooled, mountain-born air. You duck your head and peek inside. It's a Qanat, and you're about to get to know it very well. Not just a pipe, not just a hole. This is ancient engineering, dressed in dust and discipline. From here, a tunnel stretches back into the mountains, sometimes miles away, sloping gently upward. Always upward. That's the genius of it. No pumps, no gears, just gravity doing what gravity does. And human beings figuring out how to aim it properly. The entrance is low and narrow. You crouch inside, hearing the drip, drip, drip of water echo through the passage. The walls are rough, carved stone and compacted soil, sometimes reinforced with brick, sometimes not. The floor slopes just enough for the water to glide without pooling. And the air, cool, almost cave-like. You could nap here if it weren't for the occasional bat giving you the stink eye. Historians still argue whether these Qanats were a uniquely Persian invention, or borrowed and refined from older Mesopotamian techniques. The debate, like many in archaeology, comes down to definitions and broken pottery, but there's little doubt that it was Persia under the Achaemenids who built Qanats into a network so vast that entire cities rose around them. Cities like Yazd, for example, still run on Qanats today, and not in a heritage display sort of way. We're talking real, working infrastructure. The city practically sits on a spider web of tunnels, each one maintained by people who inherit the job, like an old family recipe, equal parts knowledge, superstition, and, let's be honest, a very strong back. You shuffle along the edge of the Qanat, guided by dim light filtering down through the vertical shafts. These shafts were more than just construction access points. They served as ventilation chimneys, waste removal routes, and occasionally unfortunate rabbit holes for desert creatures who took a wrong step. One story even tells of a goat that fell down a shaft and became an accidental mascot for a local well-keepers guild. A tiny, tragic legend bleeded into history. You pause at a shaft, looking up. The circle of light above is no larger than a manhole, but from this angle, it could be a distant moon. The shafts were often spaced every 20 to 30 meters along the tunnel, and the workers called muqanis would dig by hand from both ends, meeting somewhere in the middle, with the kind of precision that makes you suspicious they had help from aliens. They didn't, of course, just plumb lines, measuring rods, and a lot of patience. The process was brutal, digging through compact soil in the desert heat, with only flickering oil lamps, and the hope you wouldn't strike a pocket of gas or flood your own tunnel. Yet the results were miraculous. You splash a bit of water on your neck. It's shockingly cold. The source, you remember, is likely a highland aquifer, a pocket of water buried in the slopes of distant mountains. Snowmelt percolates through porous rock, gathering in invisible lakes that feed the Qanat year-round. No dams, no reservoir, just the land itself, delivering water like a slow-dripping gift. And what a gift it was, because here's something modern minds forget. In dry regions, water isn't just hydration, it's currency. Land with water access could feed a family, support livestock, and grow crops that could be sold or traded. The control of a Qanat meant the control of food, labor, and sometimes entire communities, which, of course, brings us to a bit of a twist. You may be imagining this as a free-flowing wonder shared by all, but many Qanats were, shall we say, politely monopolized. Wealthy landowners built private Qanats. Villages had to negotiate flow times, and every community had its own myrabi, or water manager, a person whose job was equal parts engineer, diplomat, and referee. The mirab decided when your field got watered. They memorized flow rates, they tracked the wear on tunnels, and fringe fact, incoming. Some of them used water divination to settle disputes. Yes, they'd float objects, measure shadows, even taste soil to determine whether someone was stealing more than their share. Water theft, by the way, was a very real problem, but we'll get to that drama in a later section. For now, you return to the surface, squinting into the light as your eyes readjust. You're back in the garden, and the air feels somehow earned, like you understand its coolness better now. To your right, an old man is stirring something in a clay pot. He nods at you but doesn't speak, just gestures to a wooden bench and keeps working. The scent drifting from his pot is strange, sweet, earthy, and oddly metallic. You sit and watch. Turns out he's making saruj, a traditional waterproof mortar made of clay, lime, ash, and sometimes goat hair. It's what they used to line parts of the Qanat system, especially near shafts or junctions prone to leaks. Saruj was flexible, durable, and, if you believe the legends, resistant enough to outlast most marriages. You let the scent fill your nose. It's comforting in a weird way, like petrichor, but industrial. You stand, thank the man, with a respectful nod and head deeper into the village. Each step takes you further into a world built on silent systems, cool tunnels beneath hot ground, quiet water that shaped loud empires. The desert, it turns out, isn't empty. It's layered, humming, remembering. And now, so are you. You leave the garden behind now, letting the scent of ripe figs and wet earth drift off into the heat haze. The village ahead is a scattering of low-slung mud brick homes. Their walls, the same sandy tone as the hills behind them. You could blink and miss them entirely. Each house is a whisper rather than a shout, blending into the land like it's always been there. As you wander down a narrow footpath between two homes, something catches your eye. A wind tower rising above the rooftops, slender and elegant like a desert periscope. It seems oddly tall for such a squat settlement. The locals call it a badger or wind catcher, and it's here for one reason only: to keep people from roasting in their sleep. That's right. This village, like many others in Persia's arid interior, wasn't just surviving the heat. It was outsmarting it. You duck into one of the shaded homes where the air is surprisingly cool, not icy. Mind you, but in a land where the outside temperature can hit 40 degree over 100 degree of, stepping indoors and not instantly melting counts as a minor miracle. The trick is how the bad gear works in tandem with, yep, you guessed it, the Qanat. Imagine it, that underground tunnel of cold mountain water running beneath the house. Now put a vertical shaft on top of the roof. The hot desert wind flows into the tower, gets funneled down, passes over the Qanat cooled air in a subterranean chamber, and emerges inside your living space as a gentle, filtered breeze. It's nature's air conditioner, and it doesn't require a single watt of electricity. Historians still argue whether these passive cooling systems originated in ancient Persia or were borrowed from similar techniques in Egypt or Mesopotamia. But again, the Iranians perfected the synergy combining water, architecture, and airflow into a design that could let you nap in the afternoon without becoming a puddle of sweat. You can almost hear it now, the faint whisper of air brushing down the shaft, the low trickle of water just beneath your feet. It's not fancy, but it works, and it's oddly soothing, kind of like an ancient ASMR loop. There's a subtle artistry here, too. The layout of the village itself isn't random. Houses are clustered tightly, not just for defense, but to maximize shared shade and minimize exposure. Alleyways are narrow and winding, ensuring that sunlight never scorches them for long. You step through one now, and the change in temperature is instant, maybe 5-10 degrees cooler. It feels like walking into a secret, and then you spot a courtyard. Almost every home has one. Some are bare. Others bloom with geraniums and jasmine vines. A few even have a small central pool, no more than a few feet wide, but enough to reflect light, cool the air, and give the kids somewhere to plop their feet in after a day of carrying water jugs or dodging their mother's broom. You pause by one of these pools. A boy leans over it, carefully placing flower petals in a floating pattern. His grandmother watches, sipping tea. She gives you a little nod, then gestures to the pool. You try. She seems to say, without words. So, you do. You pluck a violet bloom from a nearby bush and set it adrift. It spins once, then slowly glides to join the rest in the petal mandala, a kind of hydrological meditation. Now, you might be wondering, what did people actually do with all this carefully managed water? The answer? Pretty much everything. Irrigation was just the beginning. Qanat-fed water supplied public bathhouses, workshops for dyeing and tanning, even early industrial mills that used the flow to grind grain. And yes, some aristocrats built pleasure gardens so lavish that Greek visitors wrote home about them like starstruck tourists. And here's your fringe fact of the section. The Persian word for paradise, pairidesa, literally means walled enclosure, as in a garden. So yes, that tranquil patch of green you wandered through earlier wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. For the Persians, water and greenery weren't just for survival. They were the definition of peace. But there were rules. Water wasn't hoarded, not openly. Anyway, communities organized themselves around strict water rotation schedules, often carved onto stone tablets or passed down as memorized poetry. If your plot of land was up for its 6-minute share at dawn, you'd best be awake with your channels cleared and your oxen ready. Miss it, and that was your problem. And yes, someone always tried to cheat the schedule. And yes, they usually got caught. In some villages, water disputes were settled by the Friday prayer leader. In others, it was the Marab's job to issue fines or, more charmingly, public shame. One unlucky man in Kerman reportedly had to sweep the village square while wearing a turban made of wet reeds after being caught rerouting a canal to his pomegranate trees. Brutal. You head toward the village bathhouse now. It's quiet at this hour, too early for the evening soak, too late for the morning wash. The door creaks as you push inside. The walls are tiled in soft blues and whites, worn smooth by steam and decades. A faint aroma of rosewater and lye soap lingers in the air. You sit near the warm pool, dipping your toes in. It's fed by a narrow spout from the Qanat, warmed slightly as it moves through sun-baked channels. The system is so finely tuned that the bathhouse maintains different temperatures in different rooms. Cold plunge, warm soak, hot steam, no knobs, no thermostats, just flow. Historians still debate whether the Persians borrowed these bathhouse concepts from earlier Babylonian models, or if it evolved separately. Either way, by the 5th century BCE, the infrastructure was solid, functional, and, dare we say, kind of spa-like. As the steam curls up around your face, you close your eyes for a moment. You're no longer a wanderer. You're part of this place, this quiet choreography of water, air, and ancient know-how. And as the Qanat hums softly beneath the stone floor, you realize something simple. They weren't just digging tunnels. They were designing a way of life outside again, your skin still tingling from the bathhouse steam. You follow a dusty road that winds toward a cluster of cultivated fields. The air here smells different, richer somehow, a mix of moist soil, sun-warmed herbs, and the faint tang of dung. Sorry, even paradise has chores. You pass a pair of donkeys tied to a wooden cart, their tails lazily swatting at the air. Behind them, furrows stretch out in neat rows, each one edged with tiny mud embankments. Between the rows, you spot the narrow irrigation channels barely hand-width across gently carrying water to the thirsty crops. This isn't haphazard. It's Kharez-style agriculture, a method honed over centuries to use every drop. Persian farmers, especially in the plateau regions, became masters of micro-irrigation. Water wasn't just poured, it was ushered like a guest at a formal dinner. Every channel has a schedule, every furrow, a purpose. Every farmer, probably an amateur hydrologist. You crouch beside a field where a man is coaxing water into a patch of melons. He uses a wooden paddle to block and redirect the flow, watching it with the concentration of someone playing chess with the earth itself. The sun glints off his turban pin as he turns to you and grins no words, just a shared recognition that, yes, water is weirdly fascinating when it takes this much effort. Historians still argue whether this level of agricultural precision was a top-down innovation, mandated by royal engineers and tax officials, or whether it evolved more organically from village wisdom. Some say Darius I himself invested in irrigation systems as part of empire building. Others insist that farmers just did what worked and let the kings take credit later. You know how it goes. Either way, the results were astonishing. Thanks to Qanats and strategic irrigation, Persian fields could grow crops others considered impossible in desert climates: barley, chickpeas, grapes, saffron, melons, even cotton in some regions. And here's your fringe fact for the day. Persian engineers were so admired for their agricultural knowledge that centuries later, their manuals were translated into Arabic and then Latin, influencing farming techniques as far away as Spain. You take a few steps further and suddenly, something delightful hits your nose: freshly baked flatbread. Your stomach growls on cue. You follow the scent to a domed oven where two women are working. One rolls the dough. The other slaps it onto the inner wall of a tandoor-style oven with the casual precision of someone who's done it 1,000 times. The bread cooks in seconds, puffing and browning with little gasps of steam. They offer you one, warm and fragrant. You accept it with both hands, customary, respectful, and take a bite. It's smoky, soft, and tastes faintly of the ash in the oven's clay walls. You nod your thanks with a mouthful of gratitude. You sit nearby, watching life unfold. A boy walks by with a basket of eggplants balanced on his head. A goat escapes a tether and is calmly escorted back by a girl who looks about 5. A cat blinks at you from a rooftop, clearly judging your sun hat. But what ties all of this together? Bread, goats, eggplants, even the sun hat is water. Not rain, not rivers, but the calculated magic of underground flow, rising invisibly through the land to animate everything you see. You stroll down to a vineyard next, where rows of grapevines cling to trellises built from salvaged wood. The vines twist like old dancers, leaves flickering silver in the light. It's astonishing to think that in such a dry landscape, grapes can thrive. But that's the genius. Deep-rooted plants paired with deep-thought irrigation and wine. Oh yes, the Persians were fermenting long before the French were swirling. There's archaeological evidence of winemaking in Iran from as far back as 5 Myrozenary BCE. And it wasn't just for nobles. Workers, priests, even travelers received rations of fermented grape drink, though, to be fair, the quality varied wildly. Some reports liken it to vinegar with ambition. You lean on a fence post and look out over the vineyard. A shepherd wanders past, his flock of sheep leaving a trail of soft bleats and occasional lawnmower noises. He nods at you and taps his water gourd. Qanat fed, no doubt. In a nearby shed, you spot an ancient tool, a noria, a kind of water-lifting device turned by animals or even by hand. While not as elegant as the Qanat system, it shows how different techniques coexisted. When the terrain was flat or a Qanat impractical, people found other ways to move water where it needed to go. Buckets, wheels, and grit. Now here's an odd little tidbit. In some parts of Persia, they used leather water sacks sewn from camel hide, hung in trees to cool via evaporation. It was like an ancient fridge, except more wrinkly. The meat may have spoiled occasionally, but the drink stayed refreshingly tepid. Win some, lose some, you wander back toward the village, passing rows of date palms, tall, lanky things that look like they're always slightly exasperated. The ground beneath them is damp, dark with moisture. A small boy runs past you, holding what appears to be a pet turtle, and yelling something about a lost sandal. It's oddly specific, and you make a mental note not to step in any wells today. Eventually, you return to the garden from earlier, looping full circle. It's quiet now. Even the fig tree seems to be napping. You sit beneath it and feel the last bits of breeze drifting from the badgers above. Somewhere far beneath you, the Qanat continues its silent work. It's hard not to marvel at the design. A civilization that understood its environment not as an enemy, but as a puzzle, something to be solved patiently, with mud and math and an occasional goat misadventure. And as the sun dips a little lower in the sky, you close your eyes and listen to the whisper of the garden around you. This is the part no empire could really conquer. The hush of sustainable design, the rhythm of water under dust, the quiet wisdom of people who knew how to bend nature just enough. And then stop. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, just drifted a little in the garden's late afternoon hush. The fig tree casts longer shadows now, and the air smells cooler, touched with the promise of evening. Somewhere nearby, someone strikes flint on metal. The first whisper of a cooking fire crackling to life. You rise and walk slowly toward the outskirts of the village. Beyond the fields and houses, the land opens up into scrub and stone, and there, almost hidden in plain sight, begins the next marvel of Persian ingenuity. The Qanat motherwell. It's not flashy. No marble archways or gleaming statues, just a sloping tunnel mouth, half swallowed by the slope of the hill, marked by a cluster of ancient tools and a small, hand-built windbreak. But what lies beyond it is the heartbeat of everything you've seen so far. You make your way down the slope, past a line of vertical access shafts, each one a small circle in the earth, spaced like stitches across the hillside. They look like wells, and in a sense, they are, but their true purpose isn't to draw water up. It's to help draw people down into the mountain. This is the birthplace of the Qanat, the mother well, or Qanat mother. Here, deep beneath the surface, where snowmelt from the distant peaks slowly seeps into the rock, Persian diggers followed the slope of gravity, carving out a gentle downward tunnel that would guide this precious water toward distant villages. Sometimes, many kilometers away, you peer down into one of the access shafts. It's perfectly circular, maybe a meter wide, with smooth sides carved from centuries of use. A slight breeze drifts up, cool and faintly mineral. You wouldn't want to fall in. You also wouldn't want to climb down. But someone had to. The Mogani, or Qanat diggers, were a special breed, part engineer, part miner, part mountaineer, and possibly part lunatic. These workers dug by hand using basic tools, picks, chisels, and wicker baskets to haul up spoil. And they didn't just dig one tunnel. They dug hundreds, sometimes thousands of meters of perfectly graded shafts, by eye, without modern surveying tools. If their angle was too steep, the water would erode the tunnel. Too shallow, and the flow would stall, miss by a degree or two, and you'd end up with, well, a really expensive hole. Historians still argue over how these ancient engineers managed such precision. Some say they used water levels or plumb bobs. Others think they relied entirely on experience, judging moisture in the soil, following mineral seams, reading the slope like musicians read a score. You kneel beside a shallow shaft and pick up a chunk of leftover rock. It crumbles slightly in your hand, soft with clay. Imagine crawling through this for hours, days, weeks, your lamp flickering, the ceiling just centimeters from your nose. Not a job for the claustrophobic, and yet they did it for centuries, across deserts, through bedrock, under towns and palaces and vineyards. Some Qanats ran over 70 kilometers, a staggering feat of human patience and stubborn optimism. You follow the Motherwell Tunnel as it skirts a ridge and flattens slightly. A flock of birds wheels overhead, catching the updraft. Below them, the Qanat continues, unseen and unfussed, inching its way across the landscape. Eventually, you reach a small shrine built beside an ancient shaft. There's a faded tile panel showing a bearded man holding what looks like a long measuring rod. Around it, people have left tokens, coins, flowers, a dusty toy camel, a scrap of saffron-colored cloth. This is a well-guardian shrine, a sort of local patron of the waterway, part real engineer, part myth. You sit beside the shrine and think about the countless hands that once shaped this system. Teams of diggers, passing buckets, hand to hand in the dark, surveying slopes with nothing more than a keen eye and maybe a prayer. When a new Qanat was completed, the village would hold a celebration, not just for water, but for proof that human hands could still coax miracles from mountains. Here's your fringe fact for this section. In some remote parts of Iran, the Mogani were paid in pomegranates, not coin, apparently. Pomegranates were seen as a symbol of endurance and prosperity, which makes sense, because if you spent 6 months digging sideways through solid rock, you'd probably need a snack and a spiritual win. You wander back uphill slowly, the light now mellowing to a golden glow. The air is still dry, but it carries a softness maybe from all that hidden water flowing just below. As you crest the hill, you notice something that had escaped you earlier, a caravan trail worn into the earth, a set of ruts and prints etched into stone by centuries of hooves and sandals. You imagine merchants trudging this path, perhaps pausing at the Qanat's outlet to fill their flasks or water their camels. One such merchant might have carried silk from China, another lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, another tin from Anatolia. They all stopped here at the foot of the mountain, by the mother well, because no cargo mattered if your lips were cracked and your animals staggering. And now you sit at that same resting spot, watching as the shadows stretch long across the plain. Somewhere, a shepherd calls out. Somewhere else, a door creaks open and laughter trickles through the dusk. Below you, the Qanat flows on, silent, constant, patient, a hidden river that carried more than water. It carried life and stories and sleep. You wake again, or maybe just shift half dreaming, half listening to the hush of desert wind brushing across stone. The last light of the day leans lazily across the earth. And now you head toward the next wonder, the gardens themselves. Not just any gardens, Chaharbagh, the iconic 4-part Persian paradise garden. And yes, they absolutely invented the idea of paradise being a garden. The word itself, arid, literally means walled enclosure, and if you've ever seen a courtyard framed by citrus trees and cooling pools, you know exactly why they thought heaven must feel something like this. You enter one now, its walls high and whitewashed, catching the last blush of sunlight. Inside, the air is noticeably cooler. It's not just shade, it's engineering. The garden is a living diagram of balance, of harmony between human and natural order. Water channels divide it into perfect quarters, forming the shape of a cross or a star depending on how you view it. In the center, a pool, quiet and smooth as glass, reflecting the sky. You dip your fingers in. The water is just cool enough to make you sigh. A pomegranate tree leans over the edge, its heavy fruits dipping low like sleepy red lanterns. You pluck one, not entirely sure if that's allowed, and crack it open. Inside, the ruby seeds glisten like tiny jewels. You pop a few into your mouth and crunch thoughtfully. Sweet. Tart, a little messy. Like most great things, the design of these gardens wasn't just for looks or leisure. They were philosophical, spiritual, and sometimes political statements. A well-designed garden was a microcosm of order. a demonstration that even in a harsh world, beauty could bloom, literally, with enough patience and enough water. Historians still debate whether the four-part design was purely symbolic, representing the four Zoroastrian elements of earth, water, fire, and air, or whether it was simply the most practical way to organize irrigation and shade. Probably both. When in doubt, assume ancient people were practical and poetic. You walk slowly down one of the quadrants, the stone pathway worn smooth by thousands of sandaled feet. Jasmine vines cling to trellises, and bees move sleepily among them. Somewhere a nightingale begins to sing. No, really, an actual nightingale. You pause and wonder how many poets have stood exactly where you are, quietly swooning into their robes. Here's your fringe fact for the section. Persian gardens had their own acoustic design principles. Pools and channels were positioned to amplify the sound of flowing water, making it seem louder than it was. In some cases, small ceramic jars were placed at strategic corners to subtly echo and enhance bird calls. The result? Instant nature ASMR, engineered long before Spotify. In a far corner of the garden, you come across a raised platform, stone benches beneath a grapevine canopy. You sit, stretching your legs out, the sky above you deepening to lavender. Servants or hosts in centuries past would have brought sherbet here, an icy, fruit-infused drink, not the ice cream kind. Though now you kind of wish they had both. You can imagine it. Silk-robed poets reciting verses, scholars debating the shape of the heavens, lovers sneaking glances between pomegranate branches, all of them cooled by hidden qanats that kept the garden alive and drinkable. You'd fit right in, minus the silk robe, unless you packed one. Bold choice. Your fingers trail along the carved edge of the stone bench, floral motifs worn by time, softened by weather. The design is unmistakably Persian, fluid, repeating, always folding into itself like vines or verses. Nothing shouts, everything whispers. In the distance, a small domed structure rises behind the wall, perhaps a pavilion, or the edge of a palace complex. Persian gardens often blended into larger architectural systems, linking home, bath, and landscape in a seamless whole. Some even had subterranean rooms, cooled by badgers and qanats, where people could nap during the heat of day. Imagine a nap room beneath a garden fed by snowmelt from 50 kilometers away. That's commitment to comfort. You hear the faint clink of ceramic from somewhere deeper in the garden, probably a servant pouring water, or maybe a merchant laying out wares for a twilight sale. Markets sometimes unfolded inside gardens like this, particularly in larger estates. A place of beauty could also be a place of commerce, of community, of everyday exchange. You take a long breath, even now, long after empires have risen and fallen. The garden feels like a functioning world. And maybe that's the lesson. Persian engineers didn't just build systems, they built ecosystems. Closed loops of shade, scent, sound, and structure. Everything fed something else. Even the birds. A group of sparrows descends onto a fig tree, squabbling gently over a ripe branch. You watch them with the idle attention of someone whose mind is half in the present and half somewhere else, perhaps under the Mounte. You think of how this design has traveled. Chahar Bagh-style gardens popped up across the Islamic world, from India to Spain. Even the famous gardens of the Alhambra, echoes of this exact structure, wherever water was scarce and beauty needed coaxing. The Persian model quietly took, and now you lean back, letting your head rest against cool stone. Above you, the sky has turned dark blue, a few stars already visible. A breeze curls through the garden, lifting the scent of night flowers and carrying it gently over your skin. You close your eyes and listen. Water, birds, the occasional distant voice. It's hard to believe this paradise grew from tunnels and math. But then again, maybe paradise always requires a little dirty work under the surface. You stretch your legs as you rise from the stone bench. The scent of night-blooming flowers, now mingling with something smokier, maybe bread baking in a clay oven nearby. The garden has quieted, slipping fully into evening. Lanterns flicker. Crickets begin their polite conversation. You pass through a shaded gate and find yourself in a small settlement, tucked neatly between cultivated fields and dusty roads. It's time to meet the people who kept the Qanats flowing and the gardens green. The villagers, farmers, and caretakers whose lives revolved around this water magic. You stroll into the heart of a mud brick village, walls glowing golden in the moonlight. The buildings are low and thick, built to keep in the cool and out the heat. Flat roofs catch the breeze, and some even serve as nighttime beds, especially in summer, when people drag mats and blankets up there to sleep under the stars. You imagine yourself doing just that. You'd last maybe 10 minutes before getting distracted by the sky and forgetting to actually sleep. The homes are clustered close together, almost touching, with narrow lanes running like veins through the center. It's cozy and a bit labyrinthine. At the far end, you come across something crucial: the ambar, or traditional water reservoir, thick domed roof, heavy brickwork, and beneath it, stored cool and deep, a collection of clean water from the Qanat system. It's the village's lifeline. You might not see anyone here right now, but during the day, this is where children fill jars, old women chat about dates, the fruit, and the romance, and travelers splash their faces after long treks. Beside the unbar stands a wind catcher, or badgear, rising tall and quiet against the sky. Its openings face the breeze, capturing it and channeling it down into underground rooms or water cisterns. Instant ancient AC. Historians still argue whether badgers were first invented in Persia or in ancient Egypt, but Persian engineers definitely perfected them. Some even had clever valves that switched directions based on wind flow. They were like your great-great-great-grandpa's smart fan. You wander further into the village and find a field still being tended, even in the dimming light. A man in loose robes is slowly trimming a row of herbs, maybe mint or basil. He nods at you, but says nothing. The quiet suits the place. You watch as he pours a small ladle of water at the base of each plant, using a clay spout set into a narrow channel. It's a delicate dance. Not too much, not too fast. Precision watering. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Persian farmers were among the first to practice drip irrigation, long before it was trendy, or required plastic tubing. Using gravity, slope, and ceramic piping, they guided water exactly where it was needed, minimizing waste. It's not flashy, but it works especially in a world where every drop counts. In fact, some of the oldest agricultural manuals in the world come from Persia. They don't just list crops and calendars. They offer advice on weather, animal care, and, occasionally, marriage. Apparently, nothing says romance like crop rotation. In one quiet corner of the village, you come across a shrine lit by a single flame. Inside, a worn tapestry depicts a figure standing beside a Qanat shaft, arm raised, pointing toward a garden in the distance. Maybe a saint, maybe a symbolic guardian, or maybe just a really dedicated civil engineer who got promoted to local legend. You sit on a low stone wall, feet dangling above a trickle of water escaping from a nearby outlet. This little stream, barely more than a whisper, will snake its way through the fields, feeding plots of barley, saffron, wheat, and melons. Some families grow cotton. Others tend orchards of mulberries used for feeding silkworms. Yes, even in the desert, Silk found its way in. Fringe fact time. In some regions, Persian farmers used trained ducks to keep pests out of rice paddies and gardens. These ducks were herded like livestock and given strict bedtimes. You can't make that up. Well, you could, but in this case, you don't have to. A child runs past you barefoot, holding a clay cup and laughing. A few others trail behind, chasing fireflies or each other or both. You wonder if they know how much work goes into keeping their gardens green. Probably not, but someday one of them will descend into the mother well and take a turn at shaping the future. The wind rustles again through the bad gear, and you walk toward a gathering space, a central courtyard where the villagers share meals. Especially during festivals, you picture music echoing off the walls, drums and strings, the scent of saffron rice and roasted eggplant in the air. Someone pours a jug of rosewater over cool stones to scent the space. You breathe it in. Nearby, two elders are playing a slow game of chess on a board etched into stone. One of them hums, off-key but happy. The other clicks his tongue in mock irritation, then finally moves a pawn. You watch for a moment, and they glance up, offering half smiles as if to say, "We've been at this a while." You nod, because that seems exactly right. The whole village, the whole system, it's been at this a while. Thousands of years, invisible infrastructure, patient labor, humble miracles repeated daily. No electricity, no pumps, no motors, just slope, gravity, and the willingness to dig a little deeper. A bell rings in the distance, not urgent, just a gentle signal that it's time for evening prayer. Or perhaps time to gather. You lean back against a wall, warmed by the sun's memory, and let your body relax into the stillness. And here, in this village, shaped by earth and water, you feel the quiet confidence of a civilization that knew how to build for centuries, not just for seasons. The stars above begin to shimmer more clearly now, unbothered by street lamps or noise. Somewhere, a door creaks open and soft laughter spills out. And beneath your feet, water continues its hidden journey. You're up again, not fully awake, just shifting forward in the dream, drawn by the pull of moonlight on stone and the quiet gurgle of unseen water. You leave the village behind, the sounds of children and chess fading into a gentle hum. Now you're walking along the edges of empire. Because yes, for all their underground brilliance and fragrant gardens, the ancient Persians weren't just nature-loving introverts with a talent for plumbing. They were also empire builders. And wherever they expanded, the Qanats followed. You're standing on an old imperial road, now one of the many arteries that once stretched across the Achaemenid Empire, which at its peak covered parts of 3 continents. The road is mostly gone, worn down by wind and time. But here and there, the stone markers remain. They're short, stubby, and worn smooth by centuries of passing hands. You kick a pebble and look out across the vast flat land beyond. Somewhere out there, beneath sand, beneath dust, runs another Qanat, dug by hands that likely never knew the sea, but could read soil like scripture. It's easy to forget how impressive this was. Long before Roman aqueducts strutted across hills, Persian engineers were quietly building subterranean highways of water. These Qanats didn't just irrigate fields, they enabled cities. They made it possible to settle where no one else dared to live. And unlike aqueducts, which lose water to evaporation, Qanats are sneaky. They hide their supply, protecting it from sun, heat, and theft. You're headed toward one such city now. It's not bustling anymore. The streets are mostly dust and memory, but a few buildings remain. Thick-walled storehouses, now homes for birds and cats. A crumbled ziggurat-like temple with vines reclaiming its stones. and in the center, what must have once been a caravanserai. You step through the wide archway into the courtyard. The ground is cracked tile, and there's a basin in the center dry now, but once fed by the Qanat that still trickles somewhere underneath. This was once a stopover for Silk Road travelers, a halfway house between China and the Mediterranean. Merchants would water their camels here, compare stories, barter silks for spices, and argue over the price of lapis lazuli until someone broke out the tea. Fringe fact alert: there are historical records of Persian engineers being hired by neighboring kingdoms, even by enemies, to help establish their own Qanat systems. Apparently, when it came to water, politics could wait. Water always wins. You sit down on the rim of the dry basin, kicking your feet softly against the stone. The silence here is thicker. No nightingales, no children, just the occasional whisper of wind through the cracked window frames. But beneath you, under layers of ash and dust and memory, the Qanat likely still runs, maybe slowly, maybe barely. But it's there, because once dug, Qanats don't disappear. They can go dormant for decades or even centuries, waiting patiently for someone to rediscover them. Clear the shafts and listen for the telltale murmur of moving water. You lean back and stare at the stars again. They're brighter here, further from cities, and it dawns on you. The builders of these Qanats worked without satellite images, without laser-guided tools, without apps that beep and flash and tell you you're 3 feet off. Just instinct and math and generations of whispered knowledge. Historians still debate whether the original mapping techniques were empirical watching vegetation, studying soil textures, or more mystical, relying on divining rods and dream interpretation. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You can almost imagine an elder pointing at a mountain and saying, "Dig there," and the next week, someone just does it. You move to your feet again and wander out the back of the caravanserai. A soft slope leads to what remains of a watchtower. It's mostly a stump now, half swallowed by sand. But the view is clear. From here, you can see the pattern of settlements that once depended on the hidden veins beneath them. Small, spaced evenly, like beads on a buried necklace. You pause at the base of the tower, resting your hand on the rough stone. It's warm still from the sun. You press your ear to it, mostly for fun, but for a moment. You think you hear it? The faintest, subtlest murmur, like water, speaking in its sleep. Nearby, a lone date. Palm bends in the breeze. It's grown wild now, no longer harvested. You step beneath it, brushing against the fronds, and find a dried date half buried in the soil. You pick it up. It smells faintly of molasses and sunlight. You think again about how water was moved by gravity, by angle, by hope, and how many civilizations borrowed this idea from Morocco to Western China. Qanats or Qarez or Fogaras, depending on the region, became the backbone of arid communities. They were a kind of diplomacy in dirt, a blueprint shared, copied, adapted, passed along like a secret. Even today, some modern cities in Iran still rely on their original Qanats, cleaned and maintained by new generations. There's one in the city of Yazd that's been in operation for over 500 years. That's older than Rome, older than paper, older than most gods you've heard of. You start to walk again, pacing the old road, under the stars. Your sandals kick up dust. A jackal howls in the far distance, reminding you you're not alone out here, but you don't feel threatened, just a little smaller, a little more respectful. This system, this quiet, whispering wonder wasn't just an invention. It was an inheritance, passed from father to son, master to apprentice, city to city. It whispered, "We live here now, and we'll find a way to stay." You keep walking, feeling the thread of water below you, like a pulse, constant, hidden, kind. You follow the faint outline of the Qanat tunnel's path as it dives beneath your feet, imagining the gentle slope carved into the earth, just enough to coax water onward like a sleepy stream. This underground marvel is no haphazard hole. It's a carefully engineered lifeline that takes advantage of gravity to transport precious water from distant mountain aquifers to thirsty fields and settlements below. Out here, in the heart of the Iranian plateau, you notice the landscape's stubborn refusal to yield moisture. The desert's dusty breath curls around you, but hidden below, the Qanat offers a quiet promise of life. You almost want to tiptoe, as if disturbing this silent artery might halt its flow. Qanats were truly revolutionary. They solved the problem of arid living without pumps or electricity. By channeling water underground, they minimized evaporation, a key advantage in the scorching heat. Above-ground irrigation canals simply couldn't compete in these dry environments. You picture the laborers armed with simple tools, digging shaft after shaft, carefully measuring the incline, sometimes for miles. It's no small feat. Historians still argue whether these tunnels were initially inspired by mining techniques or if they evolved from natural underground water channels discovered by shepherds. The truth, like the water itself, probably seeps through both theories. The system's vertical shafts, spaced regularly along the tunnel, serve multiple purposes: ventilation, maintenance access, and even light for workers. As you imagine descending into one of these shafts, the cool, damp air embraces you, a refreshing contrast to the desert's blaze above. It's said that the temperature down here remains almost constant year-round, around 15 degrees or 59 like a natural underground refrigerator. Fringe fact. Some Qanats reportedly contain small rooms or niches built within the tunnels where caretakers could rest or store tools. Ancient man caves, if you will. You smirk at the thought of desert engineers sneaking off for a quick break underground. You think about how this water, traveling quietly beneath the sand, would emerge in an oasis or town, bursting forth to create gardens in the middle of nowhere. These spots became refuges not just for plants, but for people and animals, trade caravans, and even entire cities. You imagine sitting beside a bubbling pool, hearing the soft drip of water as night falls, and feeling a sense of profound calm. A curious detail: the water flowing through Qanats is naturally filtered by the earth it travels under, making it surprisingly clean. This was crucial for health, as Persia was known for advanced medical knowledge, clearly understanding that pure water meant fewer illnesses. You recall an odd custom linked to Qanats. Some regions held annual ceremonies to bless the water, involving music, poetry recitations, and communal feasts. It was a way to honor the unseen labor beneath the surface, and perhaps remind everyone to use water wisely. Imagine that celebrating your plumbing with a party. As you walk, the desert wind carries the scent of wild thyme and desert hyacinth. You pause to listen to the stillness, letting the steady rhythm of the landscape settle over you. Below the surface, the Qanat's slow pulse continues hidden, enduring, life-giving. You find yourself back at the edge of a quiet, fragrant garden where the air hums softly with the gentle sounds of evening, the rustle of palm fronds, the distant chirp of night birds, and the steady drip of water from a clay spout. This is the culmination of all that labor and ingenuity. The oasis, where desert meets design. Walking slowly along the shaded pathways, you notice the variety of plants thriving here. Fragrant roses, pomegranate trees heavy with fruit, beds of mint and basil releasing their cool scents, and date palms standing tall like ancient sentinels. These gardens weren't just practical. They were designed to be places of rest, contemplation, and quiet joy. The water that nourishes this lush refuge has traveled miles underground, through tunnels dug by countless hands, shaped by careful knowledge passed down through generations. It's a gentle reminder that even in the harshest environments, patience and creativity can carve out life. You lean against a stone fountain, feeling the coolness seep into your skin. And remember the stories of those ancient gardeners. Their work was never about speed or flash. It was slow, deliberate, and deeply connected to the rhythms of the earth and sky. Historians still debate how much of the garden's design was practical versus symbolic, whether the layout represented an earthly paradise or a blueprint for societal harmony. Perhaps it was both. There's a peacefulness here that settles into your bones, a quiet affirmation that sometimes the most remarkable achievements are those that hum softly beneath the surface, inviting you to listen. As you close your eyes, the scent of rosewater mingles with night air, and you feel the slow, steady heartbeat of water beneath the land. A timeless lullaby. You now gently drift, cradled by the memory of flowing water, the whisper of cool stones, and the quiet, endless work of those ancient engineers who gave life to the desert. Rest easy, knowing that beneath the harsh sun, there are always hidden places of calm and care, patiently waiting to renew the world. Now, dim the lights, breathe deeply, and let the soothing hum of history carry you into a deep, peaceful sleep.